75 years ago this summer, the Battle of Kursk raged between Germany and Russia. On the one side, we had the German war machine, and on the other side, the war-hardened veterans of the Soviet Union. Now, although numbers vary dramatically, it is believed that in excess of over 2 million men and around 6,000 armoured vehicles took part in this battle, which was set to become one of the largest tank battles the world has ever seen. Now, Hitler placed his last hopes for Eastern supremacy on this particular battle, and to help him do that, he had a few new vehicles, such as the Tiger I, the Panzer and the Ferdinand. I'm Richard Cutland, and welcome to the biggest gaming event in Europe, Gamescom 2018. We're here at the moment in an incredibly loud and very busy wargaming stand, and using augmented reality technology, we're going to demonstrate to you today, just very briefly, some of the tank combat that we saw at Kursk. Operation Citadel was born, the planned German double envelopment attack designed to cut off and snip this massive bulge that had formed by the Soviets at Kursk. The German forces attacked from the north and the south, planning to cut off the bulge and trap the Soviets. The German forces put the heavy Tiger Is at the spearhead of the attack in a common tactic known as the tank wedge. And the idea of this was to draw fire away from the lesser armoured Panzer IIIs and IVs of the German forces, which formed the bulk of their tank forces at Kursk. Now, the Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, which formed the bulk of the German forces, have been around since the 1930s. But by 1943, they have been greatly improved. The Panzer IV in particular was a much better vehicle, better armament with the long 75mm gun, giving it a range up to about 1,200 metres, and therefore the ability to take on both the T-34 and also give it a fighting chance against the KV-1. So in general, they were much better vehicles. There were about 702 Panzer IVs fielded at Kursk. In addition, the Germans fielded 91 Ferdinands, the heavy armoured tank destroyer, and it really was heavy. However, it had some major drawbacks, and although it packed a punch with the very infamous 88mm gun, it had a really bad lack of vision for the crew. The Soviets quickly recognised this drawback and used to hide in the trenches and attack it at close range with Molotov cocktails and grenades. By the time the German forces began their advances, both from the north and the south, the Soviets had already intercepted the battle plans and therefore began a massive preemptive artillery strike. This was set to have a devastating effect on the German forces. To make matters worse for the Germans, 37 of the 49 Ferdinands in the northern attack group were actually disabled on the very first day, and eventually the northern attack was halted completely. But the real beasts of the battlefield were the Tiger Is and Panthers. More about that soon. Hi, I'm Richard Cutland, and we're back for part 2 of our augmented reality powered retelling of the tanks of Kursk. Here again at a very busy, and as you can probably hear, very noisy Gamescom 2018. With their plans intercepted, the German advance from the north had almost been completely halted. However, in the south, they were doing much better. Let's now take a look at the two real big hitters at the Battle of Kursk, the Panther and, of course, the legendary Tiger I. The Tiger I, with its long-range firepower and heavy armour, was ideally suited to form the spearhead of the German attack. It was, of course, to become one of the legendary all-time vehicles of World War II, and hosted and packed the mighty punch of the 88mm, which had the ability to actually penetrate any and all of the Soviet armour. Also, it had very few weak spots. However, combat reports show that it was definitely an over-engineered vehicle. It had many teething problems, and above all else, it was logistically heavy for the German forces, using an awful lot of fuel and prone to mechanical breakdowns. The Battle of Kursk was the scene for the first combat outing of the new Panther medium tank. The Panther had comparable firepower, 75mm, and frontal protection to that of the Tiger I. But as a vehicle, it was much cheaper and importantly much quicker to produce than the Tigers. It was a very capable vehicle. However, it was rushed into service for the Battle of Kursk. And because of this, there were many teething problems, such as mechanical breakdowns. And also, the crew lacked confidence in it purely because they didn't have the sufficient amount of training time. The main Soviet tanks at the Battle of Kursk were the T-60s and the T-70s. But even the T-70 with its 45mm gun simply lacked the penetrative qualities to counter the German armour. A tank that needs little in the way of introduction is of course the T-34, a design that was to have a profound and dramatic impact on the field of tank design. Now, no one would deny the T-34 combat abilities, especially at the outbreak of war when it was a force to be reckoned with. However, by 1943 it was fast becoming outdated by newer tank designs. The KV-1 was also present on the field of battle, but in far fewer numbers. This slow, heavily armoured vehicle was almost invincible to the firepower of the Panzer IV. However, their armour could still be penetrated by the firepower of the Tiger Is and Panthers. The Germans were about to rally to the town of Prokhorovka, but would it be too little, too late? General Hoff mobilised his reserves, and together they pushed towards the town. The two armies collided just outside the town of Prokhorovka, and we're actually using the map from World of Tanks to demonstrate this now. The Germans had in the region of 2,700 armoured vehicles at their disposal in Kursk. However, when we compare this to the massive almost 3,500 of the Soviets, we can see that although the Germans had superior machines, they were vastly outnumbered. The Soviets defeated the superior German war machines, not only by sheer numbers, but also by devastating flank attacks. Eventually, the German army was forced to pull back to their starting points. And of course, a couple of weeks later, the Soviets took Kharkov, which officially ended the Battle of Kursk. It was the beginning of the end for the German tank-powered war machine.